All right, I believe we're live. So, hello everybody, and welcome to the Undergraduate Experience webinar hosted by the Microscopy Society of America's Student Council. My name is Chris Blackwell. I'm the Communications Chair of the Student Council, and I will be your host today. At MSA, one of our goals is to advance the research of students, so we've designed this webinar to do just that. We're going to start off today by broadly taking a look at opportunities for undergraduates in research, and then we'll move into specific opportunities that we're working to provide at MSA, including our undergraduate scholarship. So to help with all of this, I'm joined by our panelists, Dr. Will Bowman, a professor from the University of California, Irvine, Noah Schnitzer, a graduate student at Cornell University, and Jackson Sperling, a senior undergraduate student at the University of Tennessee, and a very involved member of the Microscopy Society of America, I might add. Each of you are going to have the opportunity to introduce yourselves in just a little bit, but right now I just have a couple of clerical things to go over. So first, any MSA members who attend all of our webinars in this year's series will be entered to win an MSA merchandise package that includes this t-shirt designed by our very own student council, along with other swag, like an MSA mug, notebook, and stickers. We are taking attendance at today's webinar to keep track of attendees for that drawing. If you can't attend future webinars, worry not. We are selling the t-shirt independently. Just go ahead and scan the QR code. Also, it's definitely worthwhile to meet other students interested in microscopy. And to help with that, we are holding an MSA game night next Tuesday, December 15th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. You can check our social media to register. And last thing, if you are joining us live in Zoom and you have any questions throughout the webinar, please just post those in the chat and we'll address them at any point throughout the webinar. So that should be everything. Panelists, why don't you each take a couple minutes to introduce yourselves, describe your background, interests, and Dr. Bowman, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thanks for organizing. Thanks for the invitation. And yeah, my background is in transmission electron microscopy. My undergraduate is from Arizona State University. I studied material science there, and during my undergrad, I was an undergraduate researcher, and I worked in the lab of Peter Crozier. After that, I did my PhD at Arizona State University in the same lab. And then after that, I was a postdoc at MIT for 2 years in a material science / nuclear science laboratory. And after that, I moved to the University of California, Irvine. That was last April. And now I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Material Science, and my lab focuses on applying advanced TEM and scanning TEM techniques to study mostly interfaces, but also nanoscale phases inside of other, mostly ceramic materials. So we try to correlate atomic and nanoscale phenomena with macroscopic functional properties of materials. Primarily, we're interested in electrical properties, such as ionic conductivity, related to interfaces. But we also study things like thin films. And yeah, we do some method development in the microscope as well, which is less material science focused and more microscopy focused. So it sort of ranges. My involvement in student council started in my last year of undergrad, actually. I was going to microscopy and microanalysis meetings. And at that time, there was something called the student committee, which was like an experimental student council at the beginning. So I joined that to see what was happening. And then basically all through grad school, I was involved in one way or another with student council. Yeah, and it helped me network. I got letters of recommendation from people who were at the time the president or past president, who I had worked with on various things in the society. So I attribute a lot of my career outcomes to being involved in this society. So I go to the meeting every year. My students try to go if there's no pandemic, but we go virtually now. And I have one undergraduate researcher who was a recipient of the scholarship. So happy to talk about any of that. And thanks again for inviting me, and looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Yeah, we're really excited to hear about all of that. So next up, Jackson, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I'm currently in the process of applying for graduate school and for graduate research opportunities. My background is predominantly in advanced characterization of materials, including scanning electron microscopy, transmission electron microscopy, and X-ray diffraction. My research has spanned a broad range of material classes here at Tennessee, and I've also conducted a couple of research appointments at national labs, including Oak Ridge National Lab, Argonne National Lab, and Ames National Lab. So that's kind of what I'll be talking about today in terms of my research experience from those different institutions and my perspectives of undergraduate research. And I guess as in addition to my research, I'm also involved in the Microscopy Society. I'm currently serving a second stint as treasurer this year, and hoping to continue to remain involved in that. So if you have any questions about undergraduate research or opportunities to be involved in MSA throughout the year, I'm always happy to talk about that. I think the Microscopy Society is a great opportunity for students to be involved, and it's definitely been helpful for me. And we're always looking to bring more people on and diversify our research community. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel.
Hey, thank you, Jackson. And Noah, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So hi, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I guess my background, I did my undergraduate at the University of Michigan. And while I was there, I did undergraduate research in the Hovden electron microscopy lab there. Had a very good time doing that. Currently, I'm a second-year PhD student in the Corcutus group at Cornell. My work is primarily focused on doing aberration-corrected cryogenic STEM, where I primarily look at quantum materials, especially oxide systems. And during my undergrad, I was a recipient of the MSA undergraduate scholarship.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure that everyone's going to love to hear about that. The scholarship's a big drawing point for this webinar. So thank you, panelists. We are going to go ahead and start off with a few prepared questions on undergraduate research that any of you can answer as you'd like. Now, we're going to have some undergraduates in their first year watching this, some undergraduates in their final year. So we're going to start off with a pretty basic question. That is just, why is undergraduate research important? Dr. Bowman, would you like to start off answering this one?
Sure. So I guess I can answer from several perspectives. As an undergraduate, I think, at least my experience was that I didn't really know what research was about when I started. And that was kind of the point, was to learn about what was involved. It's not something that is particularly visible, I think, for students coming up through secondary education, or even like a lot of undergraduate students don't really know what's involved in research. So I was sort of deciding between like industry and academia. So it was a good chance to just like be in a lab and have a project and interact with graduate students, postdocs, faculty in like in a way that's basically entirely different than what you would see in class. So the opportunity to just experience the daily activities of research and sort of the underlying scientific process, get full exposure to that, was important for me in deciding to pursue graduate school. Obviously networking, having to work with people, there's a lot of like daily skills and soft skills that you can develop for research. Yeah, I mean, that encouraged me to do grad school, which is sort of like the most intense research experience encapsulated in like a 4-year, 5-year period. So if you're preparing for grad school, undergraduate research is a great thing to do. From the perspective of a faculty member, I really enjoyed mentoring undergrads. I think they have a different perspective than graduate students, obviously, and the fact that they're there asking very important, but like also very basic questions challenges the grad students and myself to have answers for them to questions that you wouldn't expect or wouldn't get from like peers or more experienced researchers. But I think that is both important in training them and in keeping up your sort of ability to explain complicated things to non-experienced audiences. And also they bring interesting and new and like unexpected ideas. So I don't know, I gain a lot from mentoring undergraduates. So I don't know. I think the downside, if I could think of one, is that it's oftentimes more work or more investment than people expect. So the attrition rate can be higher amongst undergraduate researchers who aren't really, they don't know what to expect. So I think they're sort of, they don't get what they want out of it, which, you know, for them is good. For us, it's a little inconvenient, but I don't know. I'm a big supporter of undergrad research.
Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't be here, right? So thank you. Jackson, Noah, would either of you like to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I thought those were all really good points, and I thought hearing it from the perspective of a faculty member was interesting as well. I guess just in my own experience, one thing that I found really important, or that I got out of it, was like I went into my first like undergrad research experience in microscopy not thinking I wanted to like continue in research or grad school at all. And like a lot of that was because I didn't know like what the day-to-day of research was or like what it was all about. I think it can definitely be really useful for figuring out what you want to do down the road as well.
Yeah, I would add to that you know, if you don't ever go out and kind of get your feet wet, you never know what you really want to do. And so taking advantage of undergraduate research experiences for me has been probably the most beneficial part of my entire undergraduate experience. And, you know, I have friends who go off and do co-ops or internships with job companies, and doing research, if that's what you think that you might be interested in, is just as important as doing an internship with a company or a co-op with a company or something like that, because they're all opportunities for you to see what different career paths may hold. You know, if you're, say you're in material science, there's all sorts of different things that you can do with that. With a degree in material science, from working in academia to national labs to going straight into industry. So there's all kinds of different opportunities for students in microscopy and in STEM fields in general, that you can really take advantage of the opportunity to do research like you would just another type of internship opportunity, to really see if that's maybe what you want to do. And if it's not, that's okay too. It's all part of the learning experience. So that's definitely been probably the most beneficial thing for me about it.
Well, thank you, Jackson. Our next prepared question is, what makes a good undergraduate researcher? So Noah, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, so I don't know, I feel like I'm still not very far away from being an undergraduate research, so I don't know. I'm a little biased maybe, but I think one really big thing is kind of being willing to commit to your work. Like it's definitely the sort of thing where you get out of it what you put in. I think as an undergrad, you of course have a lot of other priorities to balance, but I mean, if you want to really get a lot out of the experience of doing undergraduate research, you have to put the time in and you have to put the effort in. And I think there's also like kind of maybe a feedback loop there where like a lot of times when you first start in a lab, you might not have the most interesting project to start with. You might not have like the most risky project to start with. And that can be boring and it might make you not want to continue. But if you want to be able to do more interesting and more important work, you're going to have to put in effort even when the stakes are a little lower.
Excellent answer. Thank you. Any other comments?
Sure, I can comment. I think, yeah, it's interesting at first because I remember the first project that I did as an undergraduate was kind of like very repetitive, and I would, you know, in retrospect, it was a pretty basic task and it was fairly boring, but it was, I think, important to just be in the lab and do something and just get a chance to see what people do and like how it works. And then once I was able to do this more like basic task, then I got more and more work once I demonstrated I could do things. So I think perseverance or stick-to-itiveness is a good trait for an undergraduate research, especially at the start. And I think the mindset that you should be in is really just kind of like an observer, or a shadow. Like, I mean, I don't like to have undergraduates shadow because I think it's it's not very rewarding. I think having a basic project where they can just be in the lab and doing something that's their own is important, but having the mindset that they're there to see how it works before, they're able to get a lot of independent responsibility is important. I like in undergraduate researchers who come in their second year, personally, maybe their third year, because in my mind, I feel like doing a project for half of a year, or maybe like even just one academic year, especially if it's their last year, tends to be pretty tough to actually make that rewarding. And in your fourth year, you've essentially applied for grad school already. So I think I personally want to see that person do a project, have some success or failure in research before they make the decision to go to grad school. And, if it means they don't like research after doing it for a year, then that's what happens. But I personally prefer trying to work with younger undergraduates, because if they find it interesting, then they have a lot of potential at that point. They have like time to invest, and they're interested from an earlier point in their undergraduate career. So I encourage people, it's a little, I guess, counterintuitive to start earlier, because you may feel less qualified, which, is true, but that's also okay.
Yeah, excellent answer.
I guess I'll add to that one more thing. One of the pieces of advice I received from my mentor at Oak Ridge National Lab when I first did my first summer there, which was even before I actually got to start at Tennessee, and it's been one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received in undergrad, was to go out and experience at what research is like at other places. So don't feel like you have to stay in one place. It's great to have continuity on a project if you're working with someone at your home institution, but as an undergrad, it was especially valuable for me to take advantage of opportunities to go out to other places like national labs or that sort of thing through REU programs or that sort of program type, and see what kind of research is available at other institutions, right? So there's different places and different people have different ways of doing things. You may learn something or see something that is not even at all being considered or even being done at your home institution. And the great thing about your undergraduate curriculum and your undergraduate research is that you can do whatever you want with it. You're not in graduate school to the point where you're kind of committed with a group and you're doing one particular research topic or set of research topics. It's kind of designed so that you can go out and experience a broad range of things. And if you go out and do something for a summer and you realize that, I don't particularly like this research topic or this research area, that's okay. It's all part of your background and all part of your learning experience. So that was, and I've had the opportunity to do projects and been really fortunate that I've really found that I enjoyed everything that I got to do. But it was all a learning experience for me to kind of figure out, okay, these are the types of things that I like, and this is how far my research interests kind of lie, which fortunately for me was pretty widespread. So I really found that I jumped into each of these research projects and really enjoyed each of them in their own way. So I would say that that's probably the ability for undergrads to be flexible in choosing their research experiences and be willing to go out and try new things, even if it's not something that you maybe think that you're 100% interested in. Still go ahead and take advantage of that opportunity. Go out and try it. You never know what you might like and what may lead you on a path to do something in graduate school or for your career. So that flexibility is and willingness to just kind of take the bull by the horns and be energetic about it is probably the best quality for undergraduate researchers. I see that a lot in some of my peers, and they really make great undergraduate researchers because they're very energetic about what they do. They love what they do.
Excellent answer. So we've got eagerness, flexibility, and stick-to-itiveness, all excellent qualities. And that actually leads really well into the last of our prepared questions, which is what should undergraduates get out of the research experience? Jackson, I feel like you were talking about that a good bit. Would you like to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I guess kind of what you get out of it is a little bit of an extension of what you put into it, right? That's kind of been touched on previously. But you really get to learn what it is that you like and what it is that you don't like, and what you don't like is just as important as what you do like, because that tells you, hey, I went and did this research project and I'm not that interested in it, so maybe I choose something else for graduate school, or I choose something else to pursue in my undergraduate research. So that's really what you get out of it in terms of a directional thing. I can't stress also how important it is for undergraduate researchers to develop a network and make those sorts of connections. So most mentors, all of the mentors that I've had throughout different research projects are always incredibly energetic about their project, and they bring students on not because they just want to have help on their research projects, but because they're interested in mentoring students. So they want to mentor you, they want to help you grow, they want to help you develop connections and give you opportunities to kind of take that next step in your academic growth. And so that is a huge advantage. In addition to having something, there's always different things to put on your resume, like you did certain things or had this research experience or published this paper or presented this poster or whatever. In addition to those kind of very tangible things, there's much more valuable things that are intangible, like those networking connections, and you never know where that could lead you down the road or could come back and be important later on in your career. So those connections are extremely valuable. They've been extremely valuable to me, and I've only had them for a couple of years, and I'm still finishing up my undergraduate. So I'm very fortunate to have been able to develop those kinds of close relationships with mentors and things like that. So those are some of the great things that you get out of this type of research opportunity.
And you can certainly attest to that, being just closing up after several years of it.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments on what should undergraduates get out of the research experience?
I think I'd maybe just add on. So I definitely agree with everything that was said. Like, the connections you make are incredibly important and very useful, as well as figuring out like the niche in research that you like, whether you like doing research and want to continue on with it. But I think one other big thing that you can get out of undergraduate research is you can get some really useful skills, even like regardless of whether you go on to grad school or not. Whether it's like very like fine grained stuff like how to operate a TEM, or like more broad skills like undergraduate research can be really nice for building communication skills, for building like computer and coding skills, all that kind of thing. So it shouldn't be neglected.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Definitely, it's a place to strengthen your technical skills, your soft skills, teamwork ability. I like to think about undergraduate research, in a more longer term context. Like I said, I'm interested in mentoring students over the course of maybe 2 years or more if they're interested in being in the lab for that long. And I think over that time, they can get many things, not just lines on their CV, which they certainly can. I think, if I think back on my experience as an undergraduate, I had certain friends and colleagues from coursework that I spent a lot of time with, but I also met a lot of people through research who I wouldn't have otherwise. And I think if you're ambitious and you're interested in developing a skill or getting into an area of expertise or technical understanding, you should seek that out. You should be proactive and approach what you're doing seriously. And at the point where an opportunity arises, if you're feeling like you want to take advantage of it, be proactive, go for it. Because it's hard to imagine when you're in that situation what can come of it. But honestly, like there's so many possibilities for network, travel, professional advancement, friendship. I mean, it's really, I don't know. There's a lot that you can get out of it. Take it seriously. Try. It takes effort. It takes dedication. But if it's worth it in the end. So I just like when people are serious about it and they take it, they take their responsibility seriously and they show that they're proud of the work that they've done. Because I think that's, as a mentor now, I see that that's the best sort of outcome besides the technical things. Those are things we work through with people of all, I guess, career stage. But when the undergraduates seem like they've increased their competence and their ability to do something like independently, or they're going and like getting data by themselves rather than like, finding somebody to help them do something or other, like that shows me that they've gotten something out of the experience. Like they've gained a skill, they've gained confidence, they've gained some ability that they didn't have before. And that comes through them taking their tasks and their responsibilities seriously and like really trying and dedicating themselves to it. So in terms of what you should expect to get, you should expect to get whatever you want. You should work towards getting that. And if your mentor seems like they're not going to be able to deliver, maybe find a different mentor. But you should have high expectations. And you should try to get the things that you want. And if you don't know what that is, ask somebody older and see what their opinion is.
I just want to echo, those are the golden words in research. If you don't know the answer, ask somebody older. So
that advice holds for a long time.
Wonderful. So that is the conclusion of our prepared questions section. So we're now going to go on to questions submitted by undergraduates. Once again, if anybody in the Zoom meeting would like to submit a question, just send it in the chat and we can get to it. But for now, we're going to start off with some questions that were submitted earlier. So first off, is it worth going to conferences as an undergraduate?
Yes.
All right, moving on. No.
I have a very personal experience with that. So after the first summer I was at Oak Ridge, we had an opportunity to go to M&M, the microscopy and microanalysis meeting that's MSA sponsors. And so this was even before I'd actually started undergrad. And on the recommendation of my faculty advisor at Oak Ridge, I decided to go and absolutely loved it. That was my first experience really having any opportunity to present research. And it was right after my first opportunity to do any research. And it ended up that I met the guy who was then a student council president, Josh Silverstein, and got heavily involved in MSA as a result of going and networking at that meeting. Had an opportunity to present a poster on the research and start kind of building a professional network. And so that was a huge inspiration to me to actually go to the conference and see this is what research is and kind of how it what the life of a researcher is like, right? Because you can kind of see it in the lab, but there's also a huge aspect of presenting your research. So the work that you do in the lab doesn't mean anything if you can't communicate it to other folks and if you can't network and talk to other people about what you're doing and learn from the work that others are doing. So and that's what the purpose of those conferences are. And so having the opportunity to go and see science in action, as it were, at a conference, even as an undergraduate, is extremely important. And I would venture to say that there's probably opportunities at all of your universities for undergraduates to pursue opportunities to go to conferences with funding from your institution. So I can speak from our perspective here at the University of Tennessee. We have an Office of Undergraduate Research that has travel grants for students to apply to go present their research at conferences. Certainly right now with COVID, there's certain travel restrictions that are in place and not a lot of conferences are happening in person, but that doesn't mean that you can't participate. And in fact, if you're an undergraduate, it might even be a better opportunity because the funding for undergrads might not be as available as travel funding for graduate students. So with being able to just register for conferences and participate via Zoom, that gives you more opportunities for you to go to conferences that you might not normally be able to go to due to the funding barrier. So that's, I would encourage all the undergraduates out there to go take advantage of those types of opportunities, because going to conferences and seeing that research really come to life, as it were, is extremely, extremely important and a very beneficial experience to have, especially early on in your research career.
I would maybe just add that, well, I think not only attending conferences, but I think, as has been mentioned, presenting at conferences is like a really, really strong move. It gives you a chance to kind of showcase your work and build up some skills. But really crucially allows you to network. And I think specifically as an undergrad, something that's very much on your mind, right, is thinking about grad school, where these conferences are places where where you might meet your future advisor. So it can be very, very useful in that sense, in terms of showcasing your work to potential future advisors, as well as kind of getting to judge them, where you may be able to interact with them in a less formal setting than you'll have at any other point before you're like applying. So that can be really nice.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add a short statement. I think I definitely agree with everything that's been stated. I remember my first, like the first several conferences I went to, just being like incredibly distracted, because everybody was there. You could just go to like a poster hall or whatever and see just like this huge range of research projects that you did never hear about at your undergrad institution. And so to me, that was very exciting, just to see what people were doing, and talking to grad students or even undergrads at that time was very like inspiring. And I thought, it's weird because you see like so many different projects that don't have anything to do with yours, but then you feel this, it's like everybody's in that situation where there's so many projects that don't really relate to theirs. So it's sort of this sense of like everybody's, while they're working on so many different things, it's kind of like you're all doing the same thing. And so you get this community vibe from that. Definitely being able to talk to grad students and faculty outside of my institution, and in like a very natural setting. Like I didn't have to set appointments or like be in weird like meet and greet sessions to like talk about their grad school experiences, was really important for me deciding to actually go to grad school. Because even as an undergrad, I thought science was interesting, but I viewed it as like an internship, like a technical internship, where I was going to have some skills that I could put on my resume. But in talking with other students and other PIs who were like really open to talk to me at conferences, I learned a lot about the lifestyle and like why people were also interested in doing it, and how their career developed and things like this. So that was, I don't know, I just enjoyed asking questions and hearing other people's like experiences, and that steered me heavily towards academic, like the next academic career path, which was grad school at that time. Definitely networking, and microscopy and microanalysis is a good conference because it's fairly manageable in size. It's not like tens of thousands of people. The students are involved and accessible. I was involved in some other societies too, as in grad school, related to like material science. And this one now is a very like thriving student body. So just getting involved or interfacing with them, either virtually or in person, I think will give you a glimpse and I hope inspire you to pursue graduate school. One thing that I realized about microscopy, which is different than other conferences or other communities, I should say, is the industrial component of microscopy is very strong. So all of the science that we do is sort of enabled by the fact that there are companies that build these rather complicated tools that we use. So even if you're interested in industry, this is a particularly good community to explore because there's a lot of crossover between grad school and industry. And if you go to like the conference exhibit hall for the microscopy and microanalysis meeting, you'll see there's a huge variety of different types of industrial activities going on. And many of the people who work in these companies were themselves graduate students at one point. So I think the ties between industry and academia in this field are very strong. So that made me comfortable in feeling that if it didn't pan out in academia, I could easily switch over to industry and I would have strong connections. And that was one thing I didn't feel as much in other communities for whatever reason. Yeah, so I definitely encourage you to go to conferences. Virtual conferences are really convenient. It's kind of less enticing because I'm sort of burned out on Zoom. So I don't really want to sit like more on Zoom, but it's a really convenient way to see tons of different science that's going on. If you have the chance to go to an actual conference though, 100% try to do that. Jackson talked about resources. I think many universities now, especially research oriented universities, have these types of programs for funding. But yeah, that's another thing you can bring up with your mentor. Like I said, if you're interested in going to conference, from our perspective, the costs associated with sending an undergraduate to a regional or local conference is manageable. So,
excellent points.
Yeah,
and yeah, I've got to say the whole industrial aspect of microscopy community, something I really hadn't considered before. But I think you're right about that.
Yeah, I think a good deal of my graduate student peers work either in industries that do microscopy or companies that make microscopes. So.
And now one thing I was going to talk about a little bit later, but I think it fits in pretty well now, networking within like the undergraduate or networking opportunity as an undergraduate or within the microscopy community. We talked about that pretty well there. Does anyone have any other comments on networking really quickly before we move on? Alrighty then. Looks like we hit the nail on the head.
I can just speak about just quickly. Networking for me was it was easy in some respects because it was like in the context of science. So I was interested in people's projects. It was a good segue into talking about like professional and personal things. Networking can be difficult for people. I think it's like a social skill that you don't necessarily learn for whatever reason, or I don't know, it's just awkward sometimes to talk to strangers. So I think what I liked about going to conferences as an undergrad was just seeing other undergrads. And I think the society has a lot of undergrads involved with it. So I never had an issue networking with people that were at my like stage, my career level in M&M. So it's scary. It can be scary. It can be really awkward, but I don't know. That's one of the hurdles that you have to get over if you want to actually like go beyond your current situation. So don't be afraid.
Absolutely. The worst thing that can happen is an awkward conversation, right?
Yes.
So we have to get moving along here because we do have to talk about the scholarship at some point here. But let's go with one more user submitted question or undergraduate submitted question. That's just going to be, how do I approach a new research project? It seems like a lot of reading, ...
I would say that it is. That's exactly right. I mean, I suppose the best thing that you can do to start off with, and I found this extremely helpful from my own experience, and the other panelists can talk to this as well, but I personally feel like one of the best things to prepare is to go back and if you've been accepted to a research group or to a research project, to an internship, that sort of thing, is to go back through and look at the faculty mentors Google Scholar page, or look at, ask them for papers to read, or and they'll probably send you a couple of background papers, or you can find some things on their Google Scholar, or on other types of scientific literature databases like Web of Science or that sort of thing, and read about some of the recent work that they've published in that area. And that just kind of gives you a leg up going in. I would call it, quote, doing your homework, right? You want to be prepared when you come to class or when you come to lab, and you want to do the reading in advance, so that just kind of shows it's not about being I suppose like showing somebody up, or being needy, or that type of thing. It's more about showing that you care about the work, and that you care enough to take your time outside of the actual framework of the workday, or of the internship timeline, whenever that is. If you're actually taking the time when you're there working in the summer to actually do your reading ahead, that you should have been doing ahead of time, that instead you take that personal time, and it doesn't have to be a long time. It could just be a few minutes, and you could do it over a few days in preparation for joining this research project. But I would just encourage everyone to try and do those types of things, to go read in advance, or find whatever that you can to build your background knowledge, because that's just going to help you be more successful and hit the ground running, and make the most of your research internship by showing the faculty mentor that you care about the project, and that you care enough to take your own time and get ready and be prepared so that you can come in and make the biggest impact that you possibly can on the project, and use your time wisely.
I would just maybe add that maybe in addition to reading, it can also be very, very useful to talk to people, where like, I think it's very possible to read like 100 articles and still not have read what you needed to read. Where if you talk with someone who's maybe like not working on that exact problem, but is at least like familiar with the area, it can be really useful, where they can like maybe guide you towards some good papers, or introduce you to people who are even more closely related to that area, or just kind of give you some ideas about what like the challenges and the problems are, and help you start thinking about things before you invest like a massive amount of time and possibly reading the wrong things. So I think, yeah, absolutely read, but also use the connections you have, and try and do things as efficiently as you can.
Yeah, especially as an undergrad, you should be on a project which has some sort of precedent within the group that you're working. So definitely reach out to current or past students who've been working in that area. They'll give you like all of the pro tips, basically. I'm laughing at this question because I was just reading in preparation for writing something, and I was reading some papers about people trying to understand the Martian surface. And it was like very relevant to the project I was working on, which I haven't been working on for very long. So I was just laughing because the scientific literature is very vast, and like what seems like a modern project, while it will be very exciting sounding for sure, and it should be novel and all of that, some of the most valuable reading that I do is in like 60-year-old papers, where they're introducing the concepts that undergird like whatever like little project I'm working on. And those are like very clearly written. Typically, the concepts are laid out in very basic terms and like introductory ways. And I'm chuckling a little because of how what people wrote back then, they probably didn't know what the impact it would have, especially obviously now. But that's kind of a little kernel that I take into my work, is when I'm talking to students who feel maybe like I can sense they feel like what they're doing is maybe abstract or like obscure, that the knowledge that they're generating now may come in handy to somebody in like 50 years or 60 years who they would never have guessed or never have imagined is working on something relevant to this. So reading is super important. I think all the tips from the previous speakers are also important. Don't just read old papers. But you need to come up to speed. And if you want to take, if you want to engage in a conversation with somebody, they will be much more likely to give you good advice if they feel like you've put in some effort ahead of time to like familiarize yourself with some of the content or some concepts that they can use as sort of jumping off points for discussion. But yeah, it's daunting to come up a learning curve, but it's worth it in the end, usually all the time, every time.
And I might add to that, the learning curve gets a lot less steep when you start using a citation manager. So start doing that if you're not already. So we are going to, we're going to actually skip a little bit of what we had planned, a couple questions, because we're going to get to the scholarship now. So MSA, we try to support research by holding these things and also by providing undergraduate scholarship. We have a couple of questions about the scholarship that were asked here. And I'd like to specifically direct these toward Noah, a previous scholarship winner. No, don't worry, you're not alone. I also am a previous scholarship winner, so I can weigh in a little bit when necessary. So we'll just get a quick one out of the way. Can I submit an application as a senior? I did. So yeah.
Yeah, I did as well. And I don't know, like it might seem like a little sketchy, right? Because you have so little time, but I don't know. I think it's very worthwhile to do as a senior because that's when you have like the most experience. Your project is probably like the most developed it's going to be, so that scholarship can have a lot of impact at that point.
Absolutely. In my own experience, I had been working on the project for a little bit, and by that point, you are really ready to get some good results during your last year, your last semester, and that's around the time when you should be able to write a good proposal and try to convince somebody that your project is worth funding. So yeah, I would definitely encourage seniors to apply. So what does a successful project look like? Noah, can you tell us about what your project was?
Yeah, so I don't know, I think my project was maybe, I don't know how common this is, but I was actually able to kind of combine the MSA scholarship with a user facility proposal, actually for the Paradigm program at Cornell. So the way it kind of worked for me is that we had this or my group had time allocated at Cornell, and I was able to use the scholarship in order to actually be able to travel and participate in the experiments there. So that was really amazing for me, where we were able to use instruments and perform experiments that I never would have been able to do in my home institution. So it was very cool. Yeah.
And then in my own case, so my project was essentially it was like a collaboration with a larger project in the research group that I was in, where we were specifically the project was looking at the microstructure of additively manufactured Inconel samples, so nickel alloys, and the whole goal of the project was pretty much just lots of imaging and then lots of quantification of the images with image processing software. And so based on that, your project you're proposing for the undergraduate research scholarship doesn't have to be particularly groundbreaking work. It can be some work that is in support of a larger project, because that's probably what you're going to be working on as an undergraduate. You're not going to be creating your own novel research program, more or less. So yeah. What was the follow-up for the scholarship like? So Noah, did you present your project at M&M?
I did not end up presenting my project at M&M. The work from that is actually still remains somewhat ongoing. So there's no follow-up because the project is still kind of in progress.
Totally understandable. For my project, I did have the opportunity to present at the M&M virtual conference this past summer, and it was really great because, as going there as an undergraduate scholarship recipient, it kind of, I don't want to say draws attention to you, but it certainly draws attention to you. You have some people coming to check out your project, and that can seem intimidating at first, but it's really great because like everybody had said about going to conferences, really just going and talking to more people. It's kind of the point of a conference, and it's really a great thing to do. You get to learn more about not only the field that you're in, but the people who are in it. And I mean, that's certainly how I came to be involved in MSA. And so that just opens up a whole bunch of doors with meeting people, leadership opportunities, networking opportunities. So the scholarship's definitely worth applying for because it doesn't end when you receive it. It ends whenever you're done with the society, which is whenever you want, I guess. It can go on for a while. And so, Noah, is there anything else that you'd like to share about your experience with the Undergraduate Research Scholarship?
I mean, I guess I'd just say it was a good experience. I would 100% recommend applying for it. I don't think it's I think it's definitely a very doable scholarship to apply to. I'm sure your advisor, if you bring it up to them, they would be very happy if you said that you wanted to apply for it and you had some ideas for it. Yeah, I think it's certainly something to look at if you're doing research as an undergrad. It's an amazing deal, and I don't think there's any reason not to do it if you have the chance.
Excellent points. Yeah, everybody in my circle was very supportive of me applying for the scholarship, and if you put in the effort, then people will match that and really help you with your application.
I'll just add something from, I guess, the perspective of faculty member. Students that come to our program, our department, they apply to our department with research experience, presentations, publications. These students tend to be most competitive, I would say, like amongst, choosing their labs. So they come with the choice, like a priority choice for labs. And that process can be fairly competitive. Obviously, there are a limited number of spaces to fill. And these students who come with experience and the ability to present their research and speak, cogently and in depth about some projects that they've done, this is a huge leg up compared to students who may not be in that situation. From the advisor's perspective, we need to be able to sort of trust, or at least have some ability to feel comfortable that the student will succeed and, excel at what they want to work on. So being able to say, like, I won a scholarship, I've presented, even without a scholarship, if you're presenting or you're contributing to published works that you can talk about, these are major selling points for potential graduate students. And in job interviews in general, you want to be able to speak clearly and concisely, et cetera, about the things you've been able to do. So even, and I'll say this, even if you don't get the scholarship, to go through the process of applying will put you in a sort of next level of people who are able to speak in more detail about their project. And it shows something about people who've tried, to fund their research. It means they're passionate about it, they care. So these are all sort of, I guess, positive feedbacks that people are looking for in the next steps of your career. So I encourage any student that joins my lab, I tell them from the start, like, there are certain scholarships, internal and external, that I'm going to expect you to apply for. So I'm very supportive of this program, happy to review for it, happy to apply for it, etc.
Thank you. That's really interesting to hear from the professor's perspective. So we aren't getting any more questions specific to the scholarship at this point. And so with just a couple of minutes left, I'd like to turn my attention to Jackson, actually. Jackson, I understand that you've had a lot of really varied experiences in just research in general. You touched earlier how you've worked in national labs as well as undergraduate research at university. Really quickly, can you just go through some of the experience you've had and maybe give others ideas of how to apply for those?
Yes. So I'll just kind of focus on the application process and opportunities to give you all kind of the meat of the issue. So I mentioned I've done research in addition to here at UT. I've had the opportunity to go to Argonne National Lab, Oak Ridge National Lab, and Ames National Labs to go and do research there, usually in the summer term. And so there's a lot of opportunities for undergraduate students to be involved in that. So because those three national labs are all Department of Energy, Office of Science national labs, they have something called the SULI program, which stands for the Summer Student Undergraduate Laboratory Internship Program. Or internship program, and so that is it's SULI. And so if you just Google like DOE SULI, you can come up with it'll take you in, and you can look at the different application opportunities and read about the program. But basically, that provides a chance for undergraduate students to go intern at a national lab with a faculty mentor for a summer, or they even offer it in the spring and summer term. It's much more common to do it in the summer, but you can do it in other different terms of the year as well. And so that's a great opportunity for you to go put a national lab on your resume and get experience doing research at an institution that's not where you're going to school at. And again, that's extremely important if you're looking at trying to broaden your research background. There's a lot of other programs. So Oak Ridge National Lab has their own higher education research experiences. They call it the ORNL HERE program. That's another program that's funded by the national lab. There's all kinds of different ones. The Department of Energy also has a DOE Scholars program, and that funds students to go to a variety of different national labs. So there's all kinds of different programs. I would strongly recommend looking up the Department of Energy programs, because that gives you access to different national labs that you can apply for, and you can do multiple internships through that. The something I applied for and didn't end up doing in my undergrad, but other students have done, is the Research Experiences for Undergraduates, which is funded through the National Science Foundation. So that's NSF-REU. So if you look that up, you can read about all the different schools that have NSF-funded REU opportunities. They're all over the country, and you can apply to these different programs specific to your research area focus. And those are that's another great avenue for you to go explore summer internship research opportunities. So I would strongly encourage looking at Department of Energy and National Science Foundation funded programs.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackson. I knew you had all that in you, and so I was hoping that we could get all that out and record it here. So with that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for sharing all their knowledge and experience today. I really appreciate it. We couldn't have done it without you guys. So some last information before we close. If you are an MSA member, it's time to renew your membership for the 2021 year. For students, the membership is only $20. With an additional $5, you can register for a dual membership in the Microanalysis Society as well. So please renew today. And if you're not a member and you want to get plugged into the microscopy community, membership with MSA is the best way to do that. Additionally, we'd also like to thank our sponsors, Thermo Fisher Scientific, MSA, MAS, Protochips, JEOL, TSS Microscopy, Direct Electron, and the Nion Company. Like we mentioned, we have a lot of strong ties with industry. So there you go. They're supporting this very webinar. And lastly, if you have any questions or anything you didn't get a chance to ask during the webinar, you can go to our website, microscopy.org, or email us at studentcouncil@microscopy.org. You can also keep up with our events and activity on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. So once again, thank you for attending. Thank you to our panelists, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing. Best of wishes
And
on your research.